emails. The world of information infrastructure is running on a mix of open source and proprietary software. At the Department of State, open source is a choice available in a broad strategy that is consistent with a merit-based approach to technology. Open source components are used here at the Department of State in our engagement both with citizens in the United States and around the world. Diplopedia, our internal wiki, is built on MediaWiki, the same software that runs Wikipedia. Our internal Communities at State platform is powered by WorldPress, as are Ambassador Michael Poltz, he's the ambassador to Estonia, and Ambassador Timothy Romers, the ambassador to India, public-facing blogs. We also have 2 major database instances internal to the department that are now using open source operating systems. Civil Society 2.0 Tech Camp effort that was kicked off in November is explicitly incorporating open source solutions to assist grassroots organizations around the world. And one of the examples of this was the development of a mobile phone-based app that would allow indigenous populations in the Amazon, where oil is produced, to collect information and also coordinate first responses after a spill and pass that information on to the government, which is often arriving later on the scene than people that actually live there. Some questions that are likely to come up today and at the unconference tomorrow will undoubtedly, first time I've ever used unconference in any kind of thing I've ever talked about, involve, maybe those are free, and should use that term more often. Tomorrow will undoubtedly involve cost, security, and the future of open source. As we all know, open source is not free. It costs money in expertise, customization, and support, but despite the costs, open source can provide advantages through flexibility in installation, integration, and modification. There are also many questions around security, and that's a paramount concern to us at the department. On the one hand is the argument that open source code is less secure in and of itself than proprietary code, and on the other is the belief that many eyes make all bugs shallow, and while this maxim has limits, open source software engineering processes do allow anyone, anywhere to contribute knowledge and expertise to make things more secure. And whatever your belief, there's no doubt that the same information assurance process are required regardless of which way you go, proprietary software or open source. Where is the State Department headed? In light of OMB's Technology Neutrality Memo of January 7th of this year, and because it makes good business sense, State will continue to consider and use open source technologies where it makes the most sense. It's critical that we broaden our consideration of open source beyond our outward-facing engagements and look at those for more of our internal activities. And in also keeping with the Secretary's quadrennial Diplomacy and Development Review, that we pursue new ways of doing business. States recently established an IT innovation fund that's available both to our domestic and overseas employees, and this is something where they can put good ideas forward and compete for resources, and will be allowed to fail, to test things and allowed to fail without all the kind of bureaucratic trappings that usually go around requests for money. And we're hoping that one of the uses of this funds will be in open source prototypes and fast-paced innovations. And in fact, one of the first things under consideration is an open source-based project called Secure Enterprise Browser Environment. And John Janik, the submitter, he's here today. I don't know where he is, but good luck to you. And any of the rest of you here that are state participants, we encourage you to put good ideas forward to the Innovation Fund. And finally, today's Tekkit State Open Source Conference was convened to begin a dialogue between the department and the community of developers working around the world to create innovative technologies. And while State has been in diplomacy business for a long time, we continue to learn from our global organizations and are excited to engage with all of you today. And to kick things off, I'm pleased to introduce the first panel, which is a distinguished group which represents how government gets it. First is, Anish Chopra, who is the Federal Chief Technology Officer and serves as an assistant to the President and Associate Director for Technology within the Office of Science and Technology Policy. Macon Phillips is the White House New Media Director. Macon oversees the White House social media activities and White House website. And Todd Park is the Chief Technology Officer at the Department of Health and Human Services. He's responsible for helping HHS leadership harness the power of data, technology, and innovation to improve the health and welfare of the nation. So thank you to all of you again for participating today, and please Join me in a very warm welcome for our first panel.
Good morning. So we just have a couple. Do I just say change the slide and it'll change? How do the slides work? It's magic. At some point.
While we're waiting, how many of you saw that imported from Detroit ad for Chrysler's new car?
Woo!
That caught me up, man. That was sweet. I was in Michigan yesterday. They were all excited. We're excited. We have it here. Yeah. New. Exactly. On secure networks. There's no about it. Whoa. Where's Alan?
That's on. All right.
It's actually working. We can do this.
So before I dive into my presentation, thanks for having us over here. I just have to admit at the outset, I really only accepted because I knew it would be how I could get Anish and Todd to come here and convince them to give their presentations, which I think are going to be excellent. Just to give you kind of a sense of the structure, I'm going to start by talking about the White House program specifically, and the caveat there is I really actually tried to make it a little bit more technical than I usually talk, a little bit more specific. I'm not a software engineer, and the things I'm going to talk about wouldn't be possible without a few people that I might as well give a little credit to while we're waiting. Brooke Colangelo, who's the CIO of EOP, was obviously a big partner in making this happen. Dave Cole, some of you may know, was the engineer that really pushed forward on a lot of our open source stuff. And Rob Winnicase, Rob, where are you? Right here. Right over there. Worked on my team, helped me put this presentation together, and is managing a lot of our software. And then a new face who started 4 weeks ago, Tom Cochran, is our Director of New Media Technologies at the White House. He's 4 weeks in, still figuring things out, but as you see his name, please show him all the support and kindness that you've shown the rest of our team. So with that, maybe we'll just dive right in. So I work on the new media team. We work in the White House office, and we're a new team that blends sort of online program and technology innovation to really achieve three things for the White House. One is to amplify the president's message, sort of a communications angle. How do we use the web, use the internet to take advantage of social media, take advantage of new technologies to really get our word out? You know. The second is openness. So how do we actually make content, make ideas more accessible to the American people? But in addition to that, how do we actually help achieve some of the administration's transparency goals? And the third is participation. This is sort of the opposite in many ways of number one, which isn't a... Thank you. It just got real. So third is more participation. So that's the idea with social media. How do we hear back from people? How do we create opportunities for people to engage with us? Ask us questions, give us ideas, participate, which is sort of the idea of open source to begin with, and is really exciting. So we've done a good job at 1, I think we've done a good job at 2, and we've done some really interesting things with 3, and that's an area that I really want to continue improving on moving forward. But enough about the sort of big picture. Let's just dive into some brass tacks here. So wait, can you go back? So open source software. You know, oh wow. Can I get a jazz beat? So, open source software, what are some of the advantages? Well, these are 4 advantages that at least make sense to me. The first is one code base, many use cases. So we'll talk about that in a second, but essentially we get a big pile of code that we use for our CMS, for our public website, but there's other uses that people can adapt this to. Since it's a well-known CMS we use called Drupal, there's a lot of engineers out there who can work on everything from internal business applications to the CMS that powers our public website. It just makes it a lot easier to start with one pile of clay. And second is built-in security and feature updates. You know, you hear a lot about security. Working at the White House, I hear a lot about security. In the last 2 years, I've learned more acronyms than I ever thought I could. But what I'll say is, open source software is not inherently insecure. In fact, it's very secure. As many of you will know, if you use Firefox browsers, you're using websites that run Apache. We have all been using open source software for a long time to do our banking, to do all sorts of things that we really value security for. So don't fall into the trap of thinking that just because something's open source, it's insecure, and vice versa. Don't think open source is the panacea, the cure for all security concerns as well. Extend the value investment through public release of code. I'll talk a little bit more about this, but this is a really exciting idea, I think, particularly for taxpayers, in the sense that when we work on our platform and release code back to the public, that is value we're contributing back to the public. It's extending the investment of our software development. And although our releases aren't necessarily applications that everyone can use, and we'll get to some of those specifically, they still add value to the ecosystem out there, and that's something that makes us very happy. And then finally, no vendor lock-in, shift from procuring products to services. This is more of a sort of philosophical idea, but my background, I worked with a lot of software engineers, and I just always assumed that they were like graphic designers, that they were services. You had these guys to sort of be, and gals, to be part of your work, understand your business problems, and innovate right alongside with you. Iterate on projects, really be flexible and agile to keep your technology platform current with your needs. That's very different than product acquisitions. Very different than defining something and then 2 years later hoping that thing you defined 2 years ago is exactly what you need right now. Now, there are reasons to have a product. There are reasons to procure services. But when it comes to open source, another trap people fall into is, oh, this Drupal thing, this WordPress thing, that's free. That's awesome. Everybody here knows open source doesn't equal free, right? If you're going to do open source, sure, the software and the licensing may be cheaper or free. But you still need to really invest in software engineering services that will help maintain and innovate on that software. So that's a really important point. Let's see if this works. There we go. All right, so many of you probably know that we run our website on Drupal in a LAMP stack. I learned what LAMP stack meant, in the last 2 years. It's, as you know, a high-profile, high-security, high-traffic implementation. We use a CDN to sort of accommodate the traffic. We have a number of security measures in place. But at the end of the day, this is a very high-profile website that has a lot of peak moments, such as the State of the Union or otherwise, that runs very well on our software. So in the course of working in the software, we have developed new features. That's what I mentioned earlier. And I wanted just to talk quickly about a few of them. That is a screenshot from our page within the Drupal.org community where we actually publish this software. For more information, I should interject, you can go to whitehouse.gov/tech. There's a lot of these links. You can, geek out to your heart's content. But we have contributed 3 types of modules. The first is scalability. So how does Drupal, how does our CMS work with the CDN? And in this case, because you can probably figure it out, it's Akamai, but really just with the CDN, which is a really important step for a lot of sites that want to go to be a sort of major global site. You probably do need a CDN for a lot of reasons, so we really had to invest in that. And then we released it so that other people who want to take advantage of that software can grab it and continue using it themselves. Second was about communications. We had a mass email provider. We didn't want to use the in-house or sort of the default module that came with Drupal, so we actually built some software that connected our email blast, mass email software with our CMS, which is great for the press shop. It's great for other business components within our enterprise, and they're able to sort of leverage it's called Gov Delivery, but our mass email service for that. And the final piece is everybody knows about 508. That's another thing I've learned in the last 2 years. Very important stuff. We were really trying to push to make our web content accessible to everyone, certainly compliant with 508. So one of the modules that we prioritized was a module called Node Embed. And you're about to see a slide. I never thought I would have a title like this. Accessibility through Node Embed. I've officially become a geek. All right, so what is this graph? This graph is really fascinating to me. This is week by week the amount of installations of a module that the White House developed in other sites. Over 1,000 sites run this module right now. What does it do? Well, it basically grabs little pieces of content like photos and otherwise and automatically pulls in the metadata so that it's sort of easier and more consistently published. What does that mean? It means that screen readers work. It means that when people are using our site with assistive devices, they're able to find contextual information because they can't see the photo or hear the video, that sort of thing. But that's something we put together, and other people like it. And that's really gratifying for our team. All right, let's keep going. All All right, so more than just open source software development, open source also means standards. And there's a lot of, Rob and I were talking yesterday about some of the continuing conversation about video standards. But we actually chose to go with HTML5 for our code and use, I'm going to screw this up, H264? Yeah, that's right. What did this mean? This meant when the iPad launched, they actually featured our site. There were no conversations prior. They featured our site as a site that could play video in the iPad, just because we were programming not towards Apple's requirements, but towards a standard. And it allowed people making new devices to program towards that standard, and then we just met, and it worked. We were very happy about that. Okay, and I talked earlier about having a single code base allows you to adapt it for different uses. So in addition to CMS, we actually use this code base for internal collaboration and a host of other uses. So I've seen enough of these presentations where I always feel like I need to announce that we're releasing code. All right? So we're releasing code. It's like the least interesting code ever, but it's pretty cool, I think. All right, this is our second code contribution to the Drupal community. Today on whitehouse.gov/tech, you can find out more information about this. We're releasing a suite of modules to upgrade the IMCE file manager. Man, basically this is like a tool that helps you manage a lot of uploads, and it was kind of annoying, so we fixed it, and the update's there. And then two, we've sponsored a lot of upgrades. So we're basically, there are existing projects that we've actually identified and improved and then released those improvements so they're available to everyone on Open Atrium. And then coming soon, we actually have some updates to our CDN, and then we have this really cool utility bar for the Drupal CMS again, but we'll be releasing that soon. So it's kind of cool.
Release it.
And then just because I am actually not an engineer and I feel like this whole presentation might be misleading in that case, I wanted to talk a little bit about generally what open source means to me as a super user, as somebody who really wants to take advantage of our platform. I think Todd and certainly Anish are going to really expand on this, but just this idea of open source as a really good manifestation of government as a convener, government as a platform, all these sort of concepts you hear about, it's true. I mean, the SAVE Award, I think, is really the best example of the three up there, where we basically posed a problem to, in this case, the federal workforce, and used technology to be able to connect everyone to come up with really awesome solutions. Now, maybe you can do that in software engineering, but we can actually do that with everyone else. The problem was, how do we save money in government? That's something that's near and dear to everyone's heart, I think. And we used a tool that was out there to basically allow anyone, anywhere, sitting in a cubicle in Denver, wherever, to submit their idea that they've been having for, they had for a decade, and vote on it and that sort of thing. What was very interesting this year is we actually made it so other people could comment on those ideas. We actually saw really great collaboration between federal employees coming up with cost savings ideas. Best ones rose to the top. One of the most popular met the president. It was very cool. But more than just the top idea, there are a lot of great ideas that OMB is right now pouring through and implementing. And the budget's getting released on Monday. You'll see some of those in there. It's just a very exciting time to be using the open source philosophy, not just to develop software, but to actually improve our government. So with that, I'll end. I think the last one says thank you. And hand it over to my brother, Todd Park. Thanks, everyone.
Hello. I think it might be, try Tekkit State, maybe that one. No,
This one here? D-roll.
no, how about the next one? Next one? No, the one right below that, Here we go, no, lower. Yeah, there we go.
HHS, there it is.
Sweet, that's it. All right. Good morning.
Good morning.
How are y'all doing? It is great to see you. Just a couple questions for you before we start. Who here is from the State Department? Okay, keep your hands up. Who here is from the U.S. federal government? Who here is from the private sector?
Woo!
Nice, okay, that's what I'm talking about. All right, who here is a developer? Who here is a designer? Okay, cool. Any other significant constituencies I should ask about? Like if you're not any of the above? Universities! Who's here from academia? Yeah. Nice. Who here is an entrepreneur? Okay, this is a fantastic audience. Terrific. Okay. So, what's all right? Other governments. Fantastic. Canada. Terrific. Welcome, Canada. Shout out to Canada. Thank you for coming on down. Fabulous, fabulous. Well, I'm Todd Park. I'm the Chief Technology Officer of HHS. My job title is a red herring. I'm actually not the dude in charge of technology at HHS. I'm actually the occupant of a new position that was designed by Anish Chopra and Bill Corr, Secretary Sebelius. And my real role is to be entrepreneur in residence at HHS. I'm a private sector tech entrepreneur who's never had any political government experience, who got roped in by the administration a year and a half ago to be an internal change agent to help HHS harness the power of data, technology, and innovation to improve health. So what I want to talk to you about today is open data, applying the philosophy of open source to data, which is something that we at HHS are hugely enthusiastic about. It all started March 11th of last year with something we call the Community Health Data Initiative. And the idea here was we were looking really enviously at NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, which I didn't know before I joined the federal government, but NOAA, it turns out, supplies virtually all weather data in the United States, right? So it's not like your local newscaster measures barometric pressure herself every morning, right? It's not like ABC has its own hurricane sensor network over the Atlantic. NOAA collects all that stuff and then puts it online in machine-readable form for free without intellectual property constraint for anyone to take and use. And then what happens is the Weather Channel, weather.com, iPhone weather apps, nightly newscasts, et cetera, take that data and turn it into products and services that are valuable to the American people, creating a lot of social value and economic value simultaneously. It's a wonderful example of open up the data, that's a public good, and spur a huge ecosystem of private sector innovation that turns that data at no cost to the government into a ton of value for society. So actually, just stay on that, stay on the previous slide. I'll try not to point my finger because that actually seems to indicate the slide would move, so I'll keep my hands to myself. So basically we said, look, well, why can't we do that? Why can't we run that play? HHS has a ton of data. HHS, in case you don't know, it spends about $1 trillion a year. It's a huge agency. It contains Medicare, Medicaid, the Food and Drug Administration, the National Institutes of Health, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and about 25 other agencies doing all kinds of incredible work. And it's got in its vaults just an extraordinary array of data sets that we've literally spent tens of billions of dollars over the last couple decades putting together, and which really, generally speaking, are massively underutilized. And so the idea we had was, why can't we morph HHS into the NOAA of health data? Why can't we run that play? And that's what we actually laid forth to a group of about 45 innovators at a session on March 11, 2010, at the Institute of Medicine. There are two classes of rock star at this gathering. In one corner were deep healthcare innovators like Don Berwick and Ed Sondick, who've forgotten more about healthcare in the last 5 minutes than I'll learn for the rest of my life, right? Other corner were people like Tim O'Reilly, who, Thomas Jefferson of the web, right? And here's one interesting factoid. Don Berwick is a rock star in healthcare. Tim O'Reilly, rock star in tech. Not only had Don Berwick never met Tim O'Reilly, and vice versa, they didn't even know who each other were. It's a real statement about how fractured expertise is in today's society, that two titans in their respective spaces didn't even know who each other were. But they met on March 11th, they fell in love, and they did great work together and had a baby called Community Health Data Initiative. What happened essentially was, sorry, I pointed again. Go back. Okay. Keep my hands down. That's the lesson. So what happened is we said to Don and said to Tim and to their compatriots, we said, look, how about HHS become the NOAA of health data? Is that like the dumbest idea in the world? Is that a cool idea? And they said, no, that's a really cool idea. And they proceeded to brainstorm about 20 different classes of applications that you could build with a sample set of data sets that we actually put in front of them. Data really around community health, basically smoking rates, obesity rates, access to healthy food at the national, state, regional, county level, and then data on hospital quality, nursing home quality, et cetera. 20 different classes of apps using that data that they thought could benefit the public. So then what we said was, okay, here's what we'll do. On June 2nd, in less than 90 days, the Secretary of HHS will host a giant Lollapalooza, a huge public meeting. Whichever one of you or your friends can build one of the apps that you just brainstormed. We'll showcase you and make you famous. How about that? So what then happened is, about a week after this meeting, we published the data sets we talked about on a website where they were very easy to find, download, and use. And what happened next is people took the data and did an incredible campaign of innovation with it. And On June 2nd, less than 9 days later, we showcased a stunning array of applications that private sector innovators had built using our data. Over 20 new apps or upgraded apps that took our data and did super cool stuff with it. I'll just talk through a few examples just to give you a sense of the flavor. So one of Tim O'Reilly's laws about data is if you want data to change people's lives, don't make people find the data. Make the data find the people where they're already making decisions where the data could be helpful, right? So we've got this website called Hospital Compare. We've actually had it out for some time. It's got really cool hospital quality metrics, so you can actually evaluate patient satisfaction and quality of different hospitals. Nobody knows about it. Nobody uses it. It just sits there like an asset underutilized. So we actually made the Hospital Compare data set downloadable. Bing, among others, took the hospital quality and patient sat data, integrated it into Bing search, and debuted that on June 2nd, so that if you go to Bing for a bunch of hospitals and type in, for example, New York Presby, it pulls up in the primary search result the patient satisfaction with New York Presby versus the state average, without you having to know that Medicare has hospital compare data, right? Because basically you don't have to know that because we just tell you what you need to know when you're searching for information about this hospital. So just to make it even more real, my wife is about to have our second child in about 5 months, and I was looking for hospitals in the area. We narrowed it down to a few. I decided to go to Bing and type in the names of the hospitals. I found that one of the hospitals has a significantly higher patient satisfaction rating than the others. That's where I'll deliver, not me personally, but that's where my wife, with my help, will deliver her baby. You know, very useful to me, right? But it's all about putting the data where people are likely to use it, where they're already making decisions, where the data can help. Another example, sorry. A little startup in California working with the National Association of Counties and the Healthy Communities Institute at Berkeley put together this really cool software service offering called Network of Care for Healthy Communities. They debuted that day in Sonoma County. It's this really cool service that for very little money can set up for any local government a community health dashboard website. A dashboard that shows you how you're doing against key indicators of health, like smoking or immunizations you care about, what the trend line is up or down. Even more coolly, connects you to an inventory of promising practices, things that Salinas is doing to move the needle on childhood obesity that you could actually learn from. Connects you to all pending federal and state legislation that deals with a given indicator like smoking so you can advocate for your position. Connects you to a directory of resources in your community to help you as an individual or a small business deal with fitness, healthy weight, smoking, diabetes. A super cool, actionable, super cheap software service, knowledge as service offering that deploys a community health dashboard and action network in your community. Pretty awesome. And spreading across the country now to more and more counties and states. Next slide. Another example, iTriage, super cool handheld Android iPhone app, also a web app, that helps you research medical treatments, helps you find providers. Our HRSA, Health Resources Service Administration, made a downloadable data set, which was all the community health centers in America. These are clinics that actually provide a lot of free and low-cost care to people who can't get care any other way. iTriage sucked up that data, deployed it in iTriage to enable people to find low-cost or free clinics near them that could provide services. iTriage actually reported only a few months after they deployed this that there were already tens of thousands of people who had searched for community health centers and clinics and found them on iTriage, which is pretty awesome. Next slide. Just another point on the spectrum. A little startup called MeU Health in Boston, working for a wellness company called Healthways, debuted a game called Community Clash, which you can play at communityclash.com. It's basically healthcare blackjack. So what happens is you pick a city like Boston, you pick an opposing city like New York, you're dealt 5 cards face down, each of which corresponds to a health indicator, like smoking, obesity, unemployment. You get to swap out 2 of the cards for other measures that you think you beat New York on. Then you show your cards, right? And the objective is to beat New York. Now, it sounds silly, I know, but of the 20-something apps that you could sample in a floor show after the main session this day, the longest line, by far, was for this game. It is strangely addictive. I played it for hours with my wife, that night, actually. And I learned, I've been in healthcare for the better part of 20 years. I learned things playing this game I didn't know. I learned, for example, that rates of mental illness in America are a lot higher than I thought. I kept trying to find a city where it wasn't really, really high, and I couldn't. And that will actually impact decisions I make as a healthcare leader going forward. So this crew, I know, is familiar with Farmville, right? Everyone here knows about Farmville, right? Sort of a silly little game on Facebook where you run a farm and trade sheep with each other, right? So the thing that's really striking to me is that Farmville went from how many to how many users? 0 to 73 million users, I think. 73 million monthly users in 18 months. That's insane. I submit to you that the person who invents Healthville, a game that's really fun that happens to teach you about health and healthcare, right? That goes from 0 to 73 million users in 18 months, will be one of the most important healthcare figures of the 21st century. Why? Because that person will do more to educate the American public about health than any phalanx of public health professors and lecturers could possibly do, right? This whole field of health gaming to help inform, influence, change behavior, big exploding field, very exciting, a lot more happening in this space. Just one final example. Asmopolis. This is like a single dude, single entrepreneur in Madison, Wisconsin, who debuted this app on June 2nd. He has this brilliant idea, basically take an asthma inhaler, attach a GPS device to it, and link it to a web app. So every time you use the inhaler, it records the time and place of your attack. So you have a personalized map of asthma incidents. There's a study about to come out on this app that shows that in the target population, increased levels of asthma control by 50%. 50%. Why? Because when you look at the map and you look at the time series, you suddenly realize that all your attacks are happening at work, right? Or all your attacks are happening when you walk past a cement plant every Tuesday morning. They're also working on actually how to essentially crowdsource the data, anonymize the data, and publish a map so that you as an asthmatic can see where not to walk on Tuesday morning, where public health officials can see where they need to intervene to do something, because there's a lot of kids being sent to the ER because of something happening. So this is incredibly cool. And interestingly, there are provider systems, healthcare provider systems in America that under the new health reform law are now going to be paid to keep people healthy, which is a phenomenal move. They're now signing up to buy Asmopolis because it'll help them keep people healthy and make money, which is very exciting. So, and the punchline on all this, I don't want to talk through all the apps, is that the government didn't do crap. All the government did was publish a bunch of data, market the data, and the private sector, in less than 90 days, executed an incredibly inspiring display of the power of American innovation that just blew us away. So, what we're doing now is we're going to town on this whole idea. We're saying, okay, this is a winner. Let's go, let's go, let's go. And so with the enthusiastic backing of the Secretary, Deputy Secretary, and the whole leadership of HHS, we're publishing a lot more data. And we're going way the heck beyond where we started. So we are continuing to turbocharge publication of more and more community health data and clinical provider quality data, but we're going actually to additional data sources and venues as well. Have you all heard of Blue Button? Woohoo! Blue Button is a really cool idea that we've been working with Peter Levin at the VA on. And it's a very simple idea. It turns out that two of the largest repositories of personal health information in America are Medicare and the Veterans Administration. Medicare has claims data, record of healthcare services paid for 47 million seniors. The VA, of course, is the largest electronic health record implementation in the world and has 1 million vets and their electronic medical records. So we basically implemented, Peter Levin and HHS, a Blue Button on a portal for Medicare beneficiaries and a portal for veterans that allows them to download an electronic copy of their own health information. Very simple idea, but something that actually is pretty new to the healthcare system. And even more coolly, personal health record companies and other applications have built the ability to suck up that data and turn it into useful information and action for consumers, for beneficiaries and vets. Have you heard of healthcare.gov? Healthcare.gov is something that Brother Macon and I worked on, poured our souls into. It's a site that was required by the Affordable Care Act, the health reform law. It deployed July of last year. It's the first website to have a comprehensive inventory of both public and private health insurance options across the United States. In October of last year, we added pricing and benefit information for private plans, so you actually can get the price of every insurance policy in healthcare.gov and how it varies based on smoking status, zip code, birth date, family size, et cetera. So that data currently is only findable and usable on the healthcare.gov website, but this year we're going to actually make it available to the entire world via an API, because we think it's not right that only the government should operate Health Insurance Expedia. And we want that, what's that? Private sector will do a better job, kick our ass. I think it's cool that we have healthcare.gov. It's cool that we have a reference implementation of our own data. We eat our own dog food, right, to make sure it's cool. But frankly, if we're successful, the vast majority of the use of the killer data in healthcare.gov will not be in healthcare.gov, right? It'll be in lots of other places, which I'm sure will happen. Medical and scientific data, we actually published an API portal for the National Library of Medicine in September that has APIs for all kinds of incredibly powerful resources like clinicaltrials.gov, a record of every clinical trial in the world right now, Medline Plus, PubChem, an incredibly powerful a chem database, so on and so forth. Consumer product data, October of last year, we published a XML downloadable database of FDA recalls, which we're going to enhance this coming year. Government spending data, we actually just released our first ever Medicare claim level file that is now available to the public to check out what Medicare spending its money on in terms of services, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we're doing all of this as free data sets, free APIs, without intellectual property constraint, so private sector innovators can pick it up and turn it into awesomeness. Next slide. And to make that all easier to consume, because it's in a bunch of different places right now, we are next week launching something called healthdata.gov, the healthdata.gov community on data.gov. This is a mock-up in progress, but it's going live next week. It's a new one-stop resource for health data innovators that contains a universal catalog of all government-supplied health data and APIs, not just from HHS, but from USDA, EPA, et cetera, because a lot of the stuff is actually really critical to health. It'll have a link to a virtual apps expo that contains a growing cross-section, a set of applications that use the data, that do incredibly cool things for consumers, employers, providers, et cetera. An online community where people can actually talk about the data, complain about the data, ask questions about the data, ask for new data. One of the things actually we're really excited about is we think that as more people use the data, they will find problems with it. And we're really excited about that because we don't have enough eyes to find all the problems ourselves. We want people to tell us what the problems are so we can fix them. That's a lot of what open data is all about. And then a catalog of non-federal health data websites that are really cool sources of data that aren't provided by us but by others, but other people who are doing it on the same terms that we are. Machine readable, downloadable for free, without intellectual property constraints. So that's going live next week. We'll tweet that out as soon as it's live. And this is a huge punchline of this. I mean, if you want to build an open data ecosystem, you can't just publish the data and expect people to find it, right? If you just cut down the data tree and expect people to actually hear, they're not going to hear, right? You need to actually get the word out there. The data is out there for people to use. So we've engaged in an incredibly energetic and proactive program to market our data, do biz dev and marketing, get people interested in the data, start using it. This has taken a number of forms. So we've worked with an organization called Health 2.0 on a program called the Health 2.0 Developer Challenge. There's a website, health2challenge.org, where any organization, foundation, company, individual, government agency can launch a challenge for the best application that does X. The best app that engages kids in health data and helps change their behavior. Over 20, actually, challenges have been launched at this point on health2challenge.org, mostly not by government agencies. And they've been producing really interesting results and getting all kinds of people who weren't into health data before into health data. We've been doing codathons. Everyone here knows what a codathon is, right? This is actually a picture of the first codathon that was done with health data. It was done by a little company called HealthTap in Silicon Valley last October. They actually have a really small office. They issued an APB to a few people. They thought about 30 people would show up. It was an invitation to come get familiar with health data and work on health data. Over 200 people showed up at this codathon, and other organizations have actually now been doing their own codathons. We actually have a codathon happening tomorrow. I know you have your unconference tomorrow, but in case you want to take a break and check out some health data, go to Georgetown and hack away with a bunch of cool health data sets we'll be releasing tomorrow. You can go to health2challenge.org to learn more about that if you're interested. We have organizations actually now starting to do health data camps for constituencies as diverse as journalists who want to use the data in their investigations to entrepreneurs, technologists, et cetera. Anish and I are doing a tour we're calling DC2VC, which is very exciting. We are going to innovation centers around the country, collections of entrepreneurs and investors, and getting the word out that it's a fantastic time to be a healthcare innovator, in part because we're liberating tons and tons of data. And frankly, we're doing a lot of one-on-one meetings. We're doing a lot of just jawboning with people who are interested. So if anyone in this room is interested in taking health data and turning it into something awesome, a product, a feature, a company, a venture of some kind, my email address is todd.park, todd.park@hhs.gov, and I will talk with you about what we're doing and encourage you to do the awesome thing that you're thinking about doing with our data. And the goal at the end of the day is really this. We don't want to choreograph this. We don't want to catalyze this. We want to actually take a back seat, ultimately, and just be a happy data sugar daddy, right? Just pouring our data down, right? And cheerleading what's going on. But this thing should be a decentralized, self-propelled ecosystem, right? Of data supply and use, creating a ton of value that's not really choreographed essentially by anybody, right? Including us. And this self-propulsion is already beginning to happen. There's expanding use of the apps that have been developed thus far, new apps, new features, new ventures being formed that utilize the data. more and more of which I hear about after the fact. Like people say, oh, did you know people did a really cool health games codeathon in San Francisco 3 weeks ago? I said, I had no idea that happened. That's pretty awesome. Did you know that a company called Doximity got started that uses the National Provider Identifier and Medline Plus API to create LinkedIn for docs? I said, no, I actually didn't know that. That's pretty awesome, right? And so that's happening more and more and more. And so I think very, very soon, frankly, I'm even hoping by June, this next Lollapalooza, that in fact the government will no longer be the active primary catalyst and convener, and we'll just again be a happy data sugar daddy, and this thing will be really driven, again, the philosophy of open source, open data, open everything, right, by the community overall, which is super, super cool, and create a ton of social value, health improvement, and economic value and jobs in the process. So that's really the play that we've been executing on open data. And to take it to the next level, to talk about open innovation broadly, my brother in arms, Anish Chopra.
Give it up for Todd. So the three of us are very keen to hear your questions and to engage. So I just thought to take a few minutes to lift up and provide a bit of the policy framework that is powering a lot of these initiatives at agencies like state, HHS, and others. I want to begin with just a little bit of the background on where we're headed as a country. Yesterday, I had the honor and privilege of joining the president to Marquette, Michigan. If I could get to the first slide of whenever that gets up there. We visited Marquette, Michigan, because it was a community in the Upper Peninsula that had struggled to provide broadband access to its region. It had, as you might imagine, access points in the center of the community and eventually building out piece by piece. But for the large geographic area that was the dispersed nature of the Upper Peninsula, access to information was very, very difficult. And this for a town that relied heavily on a major university, Northern Michigan University, to connect to its students, that gets 200 inches of snow a year. Snow days were a real problem, and providing access to educational information was difficult. So we visited Marquette, Michigan, in part because they took the matter up on their own hands. Marquette said, with advanced next-generation infrastructure, wireless infrastructure, they partnered with Intel and their WiMAX technology. They were able to take advantage of spectrum that the FCC had the authority over providing them greater uses for. And with 6 people and 4 days of time, they were able to stitch together this very expansive network that today serves the needs of over 26,000 residents in the region. Because they're limited to non-commercial use, they're using it, firefighters are using it to access building schematics before they walk into a building on fire. The cops are using it to access information on the crime network databases. The students, and that's the point that I wanted to share with you in the first graphic, President had the chance to interact with high school students from 2 completely separate locations in the region that had heretofore never had access to each other, let alone the world. And the president, using this wireless infrastructure, was able to communicate with them and heard from the students directly that with this infrastructure, they have windows on the world. Windows on the world. It's why the president announced our program, what we're trying to call WI3. I'm trying to brand this a bit more hip, but it's what we had said was in the State of the Union, the National Wireless Initiative. It's WI3 because it's the Wireless Innovation and Infrastructure Initiative. So we'll try to get some shout-out love on that. But the core of the idea is, as the president said, that for our families and our businesses, high-speed wireless service, that's the next train station. It's the next off-ramp on the highway, interstate highway system. It's how we'll spark new innovation, new investment, and new jobs. I say this to you because one of the most important aspects of this conversation is how folks will connect in the first place. And we're betting on wireless as a significant mechanism to engage. Yes, it'll increase access to rural areas, and we've got a multi-billion-dollar initiative to expand access to 98% of Americans. But the president also highlighted a $3 billion innovation fund to ensure that we are building the networks of the future with the security, the reliability, and the capabilities so that all of our federal agencies, our first responders, our entrepreneurs, and all their markets that are yet to take advantage of this wireless revolution can join. This is infrastructure for the 21st century. And it is what the president has called for in his State of the Union when he says we will out-innovate, out-build, and out-educate our global competition, with all due respect to our Canadian brothers and sisters. This strategy, amen. Next slide. Now, with this infrastructure and our understanding and hope and aspiration that mobility will be a key enabling infrastructure, we have a governing philosophy that draws from the president's first full day in office when he directed myself. I wasn't at the office at that day. I came several months later, thanks to the Senate confirmation process. The president said, I want a government that's more open, and that was in his minds defined by being more transparent. You heard about the data. Being more participatory, and being more collaborative in the execution. Now that philosophy in the tech community, we've translated into the basic role we see of acting as a convener, using 3 policy levers in almost everything that we do. Technically, we believe there's opportunities for more pre-competitive R&D collaboration, to harness the power of open data, and to engage in the use of standards activities that will unlock new market opportunities, and to do so built on the strength of the American standards movement, voluntary, industry-driven consensus processes. When you combine these technology policy levers with a new commitment to public participation, we believe we will form ecosystems that will deliver results, not just process and program launches, but real results that are tangible in the lives of everyday Americans. Next slide. A word on R&D collaboration. One of our first investments in healthcare information technology, I see my man Dr. Kolodner in the house. What's up, brother? One of our first investments was to collaborate with research universities around the country. We identified 4 through a competitive process. One of those 4 at Harvard University proposed a very innovative concept. They had said, look, billions and billions of dollars have been invested in the nation's healthcare infrastructure for data that are proprietary and locked in. We propose to build essentially a platform framework that can liberate the data from those legacy systems without having to have those hospitals rip and replace their investments. This very bold concept, a year to the day they were announced that they won the award, in just 2 weeks' time in March, will publish an API on their prototype framework that will allow every single one of you to build innovative new medical applications that use clinical information that obviously must meet the security and privacy standards that we expect in our healthcare ecosystem. And they are announcing a $5,000 award for the best HTML5 app that we built on their open API. That announcement is going to be forthcoming in March. They've announced their intention to do this. You will see this featured on Challengegov, which is the point I want to bring to you on the right-hand side of the graphic, depending on where you're sitting. A platform we've enabled for every federal agency to challenge the American people or the international community to collaborate in the problem solving that we need to get big things done for our country. Over 64 challenges are new or in progress across 24 federal agencies, and thanks to the American Competes Reauthorization Act that was signed by the President in January of 2011, every single federal agency now has congressional authority to pursue prizes, challenges, and competitions exactly as the way that Todd outlined the HHS community has done it. No general counsel can stand in the way of our movement in this philosophy. Next slide.
Does that include USAID?
Yes, of course, it's a federal agency. Yes, sir. On the spirit of open data, it's not just our healthcare ecosystem that's taking advantage of this. In the Recovery Act, we included over $650 million to reward innovative projects that will transform the American educational system, to close the achievement gap that we see in this great country, and to tap into this reservoir of entrepreneurship and education. The President launched a new program called I3, whose mission was to test, validate, and scale the best innovations that will improve our educational outcomes. But they embedded the philosophy of open data from day one. Every single applicant to the grant signed a waiver allowing us to publish a summary of their application at data.ed.gov. You can visit today and download in your community every application. Whether or not they got federal funding, you will know who's anticipating and engaging in entrepreneurial activity in education. Second, every single application that was peer-reviewed and scored over an 80 on their assessment framework, which order of magnitude is about 100 applicants per category that were scored. We were able to publish the top 100, even though only 49 programs were ultimately funded the federal dollars. By publishing those that were good enough, i.e. they made it by peer review, we just ran out of money, we've created or nurtured a secondary market for other stakeholders to pick up the ball and invest. And certainly, last but not least, there was a requirement in the law that the applications had to achieve a 20% match. And rather than force the match before the application, we wanted the ideas to stand on their own. In the spirit of open collaboration, over 40 foundations agreed to join together in a common grant-making portal called the Foundation Registry i3.org that would allow any applicant to the I3 program a single front door into those foundations' own internal selection processes. It was an experiment in whether or not we could effectively build a match.com between great ideas across all corners of the country and those with resources to support them, be they federal or philanthropic. Every single one of the 49 awardees that had to meet their 20% match did so. And guess what? They had 30 days, by the way, to secure that match from the time they were told they were in the top 49. 40% of the dollars secured for their match came from the organizations that were part of the Foundation Registry. That is the transformational collaboration spirit and open philosophy for how we run our government. Over $55 million in cash came out of those philanthropic organizations within 30 days, if you will, of knowing that they made the top 49. Last slide. It's about standards and consensus activities to open up new market opportunities. Todd and I visited Boston in October of 2009, and we literally asked the question, why can't we use the internet for safe, secure, and hopefully scalable infrastructure to help exchange health information between patients and providers, hospitals and doctors, and public health institutions and researchers? Why can't we just use the internet? Well, we'd love to email each other our medical information, but nobody does it because it doesn't meet the security requirements. Can't we build on what works? And in March of 2010, HHS directed the formation of basically an all-volunteer army to spend 90 days locked in a proverbial room to build the technical standards that would allow for essentially safe, secure email. Vendors all across the chain, whether it be Google or Microsoft or healthcare-specific giants like Epic and others, all came together. Even though they had wildly different views technologically about how to achieve this goal, they achieved consensus in that 90-day time frame. They then worked together on a collaborative reference implementation that has now over 25,000 lines of code. It's a simple code base. And, wouldn't you know it, on January 12th, 2011, the first private commercial transaction of sending health information safely and securely using this protocol that did not exist in nature a year earlier took place when Hennepin County Medical Center, a public hospital in Minnesota, sent immunization data to the state health department as required. This notion of collaborative, voluntary industry consensus standards activities, where the government acts as a convener, and I think we paid for the wiki and project manager, that's basically it, is now unleashing this wave of innovation. And to give you an order of magnitude, I chatted with the Hennepin County folks. Previously, they had to build a point-to-point interface if they wanted to have an electronic exchange with the health department. And you and I know how annoying it is to call up the IT department, schedule the resources, build that interface, get it going, thousands of dollars, weeks and weeks go by, if not months. Now, the vendor that built this once, that's scaling it around the United States, said it would cost $495 and can be done in 4 hours. Literally. And they're not the only vendor. Dozens of vendors have announced that they will make these programs, this standard, widely deployable. Healthcare information will be shared around the United States in 2011. It'll be powered by the direct protocol. Mark our words, because we're going to make it happen, brother and sister. Here, last slide.
They're going to make it happen.
They're going to make it happen, is exactly right. Last slide. This is our philosophy. Okay, Brian Sivak is in the house from Washington, D.C. It's not just a federal philosophy, it's a philosophy of governance. Our technology community is coming together and embodying these principles at the federal, state, and local levels. You see this in our smart grid collaboration, where companies like Google and others are opening up APIs. You see this in transportation departments, D.C. putting out its metro, bus, and rail schedules available through APIs. You see this in the Open 311 movement, where folks can report about potholes and other things that improve their lives. That is our philosophy. That's what we're doing here. Now the three of us are here to take your questions. Thank you very much. I just realized we were flying. Well, we'll take a few. Shout, who's got one?
I got a question.
Go for it, bring it on.
Is this going to work within the NIST report on cloud computing and help open it up for federal agencies?
So the question was very nerdy and techy, thank you for that. The question was on the standards process in particular. A federal agency called NIST is the responsible party for developing our policy framework and executing on that framework. I would like to modify your question with two pieces. Number one, every single one of you is open to share your views about voluntary industry consensus standards. There's an RFI, the request for information, right now, where we're trying to understand how we can codify this spirit of convening and standards and collaboration, and to make sure that that's is baked into our policy framework for standards. So any one of you that has thoughts on this issue should visit NIST.gov and share your views about how our standards policy should reflect these, if at all we need to do any changes. The second question, the question he actually asked was, in the same spirit, NIST is responsible for engaging on standards for the federal government's cloud computing initiative, and that too, in the FedRAMP program, is being built on an open, collaborative model where your input is right now underway in our solicitation of feedback. So there's a set of technical requirements that the agency's CIOs have worked with NIST to publish. That's available in a program we're calling FedRAMP, and NIST is engaging to understand what the standards should be for cloud computing as we move under our other brothers' efforts, Vivek Kundra's work, to promote the adoption of cloud computing in the federal government. Other questions? Professor, rock and roll, man. Visualization's good. Yes, we got it.
Okay.
Thank you very much. With respect to Health and Human Services and the metaphor of the Noah of science, could you describe the crosswalk from mutual consent to zoological consent, from the perspective that the 20th century Informed consent is passé at this point, and 2x2 is known and ought to be free and truthful.
So actually, I'm not completely sure I totally understand the question. Can you just hum a few more bars about the arc of your inquiry?
Well, the bars are proof that everyone with a JD realizes the powerful technology that is both visible, observable, and subliminal. And we ask for a level of lightheartedness to enlighten us and tell it like it is.
I need a couple more bars.
Yeah, we got it. Yeah.
I'm so sorry. I just...
Please explain mutual consent with respect to zoological consent. We are all species of the same kind.
We got it. Yeah. Next question. Thank you.
Actually, let's talk afterwards. I really do want to answer your question, but I need a little more info. So
Thank you, Mr.
let's
Park.
talk afterwards. Okay.
An even-handed remark.
Okay.
I'm Ben Schneiderman, University of Maryland. It's
Hey, Ben.
Great.
Yeah.
Hey.
What's up?
You three guys have made a transformation in Washington that hasn't happened for decades in the technology sector. It's just a pleasure. And what I think is really important, it's enduring. It's going to make a change for a long time. You've highlighted clearly the benefits of having common data standards. That really makes it all move forward. What I think is necessary to take to the next level for open source is having more attention to the user interface standards. Now, you've got usability.gov out there, which has promoted guidelines and standards for web design. How do you engage a mechanism by which you're going to promote a set of common guidelines about the interface design? Because it's great when you get little apps playing around and everybody makes little games, but when these things have to work together for life-critical and for government-critical applications, you got to use the same terminology, it's got to look the same, and they've got to work together. So in order to make this work, there's going to have to be an effort that tells us what the common standards are, and I think there's a real opportunity. Once you put that to work, everything doubles up.
Nice.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm just kidding. Yeah.
So where do you go?
Nice question.
I want to know who's going to do that. I mean,
Yeah.
usability.gov is a GSA group that's been a great success in doing that, moving that along. And I just like to encourage you to give them the handle to make that happen. I'm on the judging panel for that Harvard Smart Apps thing, and it's a real problem if you're going to get all these different apps and they come from different people and different designs. You can't move from one to the other unless there's a real basis for commonality.
Well, let me try to tackle that, and then these guys can dive in, because that's a tough one. I mean, the short answer is, I don't have an answer. I don't have a talking point to tell you how we solve that. What I can say is that for too long, design and UI and information architecture, I think, has been too far back in the process of website development, which is the area I'm more familiar with. Mobile application development, all those things I think are fairly derivative of that. The project that I was able to help HHS with on healthcare.gov, I think, took a step forward in terms of looking at user interface and information architecture. But it was done in a silo, which is just the way things have worked in government. And one of the frustrations from that project that we can continue to remedy is the lessons and the sort of progress we made with that site, I don't think was necessarily transferred to other sites. We haven't really taken the learnings and the work that we did there and apply it to other really important citizen services. There is a project right now, it's early on, so I don't want to get too into detail about it, but the idea is that one of the assets the federal government has, makes it unique as an institution, is a control over the provisioning of .gov domains. We have too many websites, they're all over the place, there's no consistency to them, and so we're looking at how we can actually use that very convenient point to interject a little more rhyme and reason and standards. Now that is both a process question of how we do that from a policy perspective, but it also is a strategy perspective in terms of what are those standards, how should those be developed, and that's going to be a very public consultative process. The larger question, when we talk about making data free and having hackers in their garages or students in universities or private companies all develop towards a single interface, that's a really tough challenge, and my reaction is one way we can help with that is by leading by example. So if we can actually, as a government, have a consistent approach to this stuff, maybe it'll influence the free market of all the other folks that are taking this data and adding their 2 cents.
And one very, very, very small example of that could be interesting is Blue Button, actually. So we very consciously across, actually not just VA and Medicare, but also DoD, decided to all use the same concept. Phrase blue button icon to signify that you could get a copy of your own data. What's interesting now is I'm hearing about more and more private sector companies that want to adopt Blue Button, that want to call it Blue Button, they want to use the icon, want to understand how they could actually become part of that effort. So that's one. But Ben, we'd love to follow up with you about that because I think it's a huge, an interesting challenge and opportunity. We'd love your ideas about how to, in a decentralized, grassroots, self-propelled ecosystem, right, promulgate user interface standards without constraining innovation, without being draconian.
Yeah. What you're doing is historically important. Let's get it right.
Yeah.
We got time for like one more question, guys, so hold your questions to the break after. This one's the last one.
Tell us who you are again.
My name is Nonak. Hi, comrades. Yeah. So my question to you is, it's great that you're building this internal competition collaborativeness, but besides corporations, where do you see international competition or competition for these types of international standards? And if there isn't any competition or competition as it is right now, who are your international partners?
So I'll just take a quick one because part of international is in my responsibility set. So this is going to be one-offs. We've signed an MOU with the European Union to collaborate on health IT standards, and we're actively debating right now the method by which we tap into this same entrepreneurial ecosystem in the US and in Europe around basically the model of common data sharing. Because in the spirit of Ben's comment, there's actually a lot of conversation about data models and exchange languages and some other features that are building blocks to the user interface stuff he was describing. So we have them in pieces and parts. Certainly, when the president visited India, we signed the first U.S.-India Open Government Dialogue. We'll be formalizing our first meeting early April. But in the prep work for that, it is absolutely clear that this movement around open data is at the center of that collaboration. You're going to see very specifically some pretty cool announcements when we get to April if this stuff pans out. But it's about bilateral relationships in the short run, although there's zero limit to any international. Canada, my brothers, you're totally welcome to engage in any and all of our open activities. There's no restriction. But from a formal governmental, State Department-like MOU, dialogue, framework, those are being engaged bilaterally. And I'll have one final observation, and that is, remember, the president gave a speech at the UN in September, and he challenged for all foreign governments to join in this philosophy of openness. In fact, I would say almost a third of his speech, I can't do word count, but a significant chunk of his speech was dedicated to the philosophy of openness and how he's challenging us to serve the American people. And a dialogue has formed with dozens of countries, now an informal gathering and hopefully a larger group that will hopefully bring more teeth to this as we look to the anniversary of the president's speech in September. I think we got to peace out.
We do. So
Thank you, everybody, for hearing us out.
Hello. May I make a very brief comment?
So you know what? We really have to move to the next panel.
I promise to be very brief. It's kind of important.
We really appreciate you helping us respect the
never
time. Thank you. So Anish, Macon, Todd, thank you guys so much for talking about how we're using open source in government. Super helpful way to kick off the day. So up next, we've got a couple of lightning rounds just to keep it kind of crazy, keep you guessing. So Gunnar Hellickson, where you at? Yay. So Gunnar is with Open Source for America. He's also Chief Tech Strategist for Red Hat's Public Sector Group. So join me in welcoming him. Thanks.
All right, everybody. How you doing? All right, well, Noel figures out my presentation. Raise your hand if you're if you work in the federal government. Keep your hand up if your agency is using open source software. Keep your hand up if your agency has participated in open source communities. Keep your hand up if your agency has released an open source project. Congratulations. Congratulations. Okay, so my name's Gunnar Hellickson. As she said, I'm the Chief Technology Strategist for Red Hat, looking at all the presentations from Anish and Todd Park and Megan Phillips. I'm going to apologize for the quality of my slides, but I do sell free software for a living, so I can't. So that's one of my hats. My other hat is as co-chair of Open Source for America, of which there are many members here. It's nice to see many familiar faces. How you doing? Deb, Salona, hello. Let's go to the next slide. So we won in 2004. OMB issued a memo that said that open source software was, for procurement purposes, the same as proprietary software. seems like a number of agencies didn't quite get the hint. We were still getting questions about, can we use open source software? Is it secure? Is it legal for me to take free stuff? And so there were a series of agency memos that followed up that OMB memo in 2004, and then DoD in 2009 dropped this bomb of a memo. It was about 3 pages long with this like enormous appendix, which said that not only should the DoD procurement agents be considering open source software, but that they should be they should actually seriously consider participating in open source communities, and it listed all the reasons why they should. And so that's a big deal, right? So let's go to the next slide. So we often, at Open Source for America, and all of our constituent academic institutions, companies, volunteers, we often get questions from folks in government like the ones above. We'll actually have CTOs come to us, CIOs come to us and say, do you have any idea how much open source we're using? Because I can't count it. There's no way to do it. And it's tricky with open source software, right? Because nobody's buying a license. It could just be used. Nobody has to ask permission. It's just there, and it's everywhere underfoot. Another question is, why aren't there more government open source projects? How do I open source my own project? How well are the OMB and DoD policies doing? And so if we had an infinite number of resources and we were totally omniscient, we could probably do a census of where open source software is being consumed in the government. Of course, we can't do that, so instead we decided for this report card that we developed to kind of describe what an ideal set of agency policies might look like, and this is both descriptive, right, and prescriptive, right? So now we have a way of measuring an agency's ability to consume and produce open source software, and we also have an ability to now show agencies this is what you need to be doing if you want to consume and produce open source software. So we go to the next slide. So looked at the budget, right, because we want to see where the software money is being spent and where the pain is. We want transparency in the operations. We want to see open standards preferred. We go through. If you go to the report card on the website, and you'll see the address in a second. You'll see the kind of methodology we used. I don't think the methodology is perfect, but I think this is a good kind of stake in the ground. This is an excellent start, and this is, after all, the first report card. We'll be doing another one and another one and another one. Let's say FOIA policy is actually extraordinarily important because there is a tremendous amount of software and data that leaves agencies through the FOIA process. They usually have to be compelled, right? The most famous one is probably the VA Vista software, the electronic health records. The technology neutrality memo was fantastic, and of course, OMB saying that there's going to be technology neutrality and that we should consider open source software right alongside proprietary software and that we should be promoting open standards and open data is great, but you don't really see a lot of traction on that until you see the kind of supplementary memos down at the agency and the office and the department. So we're looking for that as well. And finally, and I think most important, is a lot of agencies are struggling, even though they may be consuming open source software very, very well, a lot of folks agencies want to be contributing to open source projects. They may have developed projects in-house that they want to open source, that they want to give back to the public, and the conversation starts with them going to their CIO, their CTO, saying, I want to release this code. And the CIO says, go talk to counsel. And then you never hear from them again, right? And so we need policies, we need a procedure for being able to do this. So we go to the next slide. So these are the measurements. State Department employees, if you're looking for your agency, it's closer to the bottom. And actually we struggled with whether we wanted to actually put numbers on this or put a letter grade on it. And one of the reasons we were reluctant to do so was, again, this is prescriptive. This is supposed to help agencies understand what they can do and ways that they can help open source inside their organization. So the Department of Defense is way at the top. Dan Reisacker, among the many authors of the DoD memo. Congratulations, 82%. Very well done. It's almost unfair, though, to say that the Department of Defense wins at this. What is your budget, Dan? Yeah, larger than everyone else's. That's accurate. So of course the DoD has really big problems and an enormous budget to try and solve them with, and so they've probably tried everything at least once. And so open source is probably among those things. So Department of Energy is next, which makes a lot of sense. You got a lot of scientists who are very familiar with the open source process. You got the national labs, so that makes a lot of intuitive sense. And then you see some clustering going on down at the bottom end of this. Now the nice thing is that it is lumpy. Actually, if we go to the next slide. Okay, so the good news is that you got Department of Energy, Department of Defense, great big no-nonsense agencies, and they are taking open source very, very seriously. I think that's not a point to overlook. There is broad agreement, that's that clustering at the bottom, that 40%, and generally what the policies that those agencies have are, yes, you can consume open source software, full stop. They haven't yet made that next step of what does participation look like, or what does contribution of code look like. So the fact that there's consensus is great, but we still have a lot of agencies that need to move the ball forward in order to fully exploit all of the advantages they can get from open source and the open source development process. All right, I think the next slide, and that's it. Thanks very much, everybody. I'm instructed that I can take questions. Oh, awesome.
Am I a big liar? No, I think we get. All right, so no, I'm a total liar.
All right. Bye, guys.
Called off from the sides. Okay, so our next lightning session is with the very famous Andrew McLaughlin, who's with Civic Commons, and I think he's got more than 10 minutes. We'll see. He's got 5, just kidding.
Not fast. Come on, Andrew.
Let's see, we just need to flip on my computer. Let's go. There we go. I'm experimenting with new presentation software today, so if it's a debacle, if it's a debacle, you'll know who to blame. I'm Andrew McLaughlin. I recently left the government, as my lack of tie will attest, and was in significant danger of spending more time with my wife and kids. So one of the things I decided to do was get involved in Civic Commons, which I'm going to be presenting today. So, basic story behind Civic Commons is to try to help cities and state and local governments, which typically do their technology projects in isolation, to figure out where the commonalities lie, and then to build bridges across government lines so that these cities can build the things that they want to use in common together in a collaborative way. The good news is that, of course, this is already happening. Collaborative development by government agencies is taking place at many different levels and in lots of different ways. And, you know, for example, there was a story recently about how the state of Minnesota built a new unemployment compensation management system and is now sharing it with the state of Iowa. So it's not like this is not happening. But basically, we think that there is an opportunity to build a broader platform of different modular components to provide different sorts of functions for different public services that cities can use in common and, most importantly, for free or at low cost. The goal that Civic Commons has set is that if we can get broad participation, we think we can save $1 billion over the next 3 to 5 years by using open source and proprietary software developed in common. So how do you do this? Well, you need to have cities. You need to connect them up with the technologies that are available. These can be proprietary or open source, or they can be web-based services, or a combination of the above. We need to hook cities up with information resources, in other words, other people who know what they're doing in other cities, documentation on issues like the legal dynamics around open sourcing, something that you've been working on. And finally, to hook them up with support organizations, everybody from vendors to nonprofits to volunteers and others that are in a position to help with their technology projects. So Civic Commons is working on a number of things already. I will embarrass in a moment the first crew of Civic Commons people that are here in the room today, but they're getting to work already at cataloging the Civic stack, in other words, documenting the software that's available and already out there. This is necessary if you're going to be able to build an open marketplace that allows you to match the tools with the needs and the support. They're already working on the federal IT dashboard, so this is a package that Civic Commons is going to be taking and moving into open source land so that any city or any state or local government can put it to work in their own environment. They've taken under their wing San Francisco's enterprise addressing system, which is a sort of a basic platform for managing geolocated and geocoded data, in particular addressing data in the city of San Francisco. Super useful for cities to be able to use data for planning and the delivery of public services. Likewise, the Federal Register, which requires a pretty high level of standardization of data going in, but nevertheless is a very convenient way to take official government publications, official government documentation, and make it generically available as standardized machine-readable data, which is a platform which you can build all sorts of things on top of. And then the one that I'm most excited about is the Open 311 system, which is being, in particular, contributed by DC and San Francisco, along with New York and other cities that have built these systems to take citizen inputs through whatever mechanism the citizen wants to send it in, text message, mobile phone picture, phone call, email, whatever it might be, and then manage the flow that ensues. In other words, taking the problem, ticketing it, handing it off to the responsible agency, getting the updates as they come back in, closing the ticket, mapping all of this so that citizens can see it in real time, providing dashboards for the political leadership and others to see the performance of the agency, and then, if you do it in an open way, enabling new modules to come in for trash collection or fire protection or police or whatever it might be. But it becomes, you start off with a simple 311 system, it becomes a full backbone information management scheme for the city. So those are some of the projects that are underway right now. It's a growing village of participants. The DC CTO, Code for America, Open Plans, and OReilly put in the sort of initial money and effort and labor to get it going. But as you can see, we've got a growing list of participants. And let me just say, at the moment, where's Brian Sivak? Oh, there's Brian. So Brian, former DC CTO. Where are Michelle, Michael, and Jeremy? Right over there. So these are Code for America volunteers whose initial project at the moment is getting Civic Commons up and running. Is anybody from Open Plans here? Oh yeah, there's Philip Ashlock. Now, of course, and last but not least, from OReilly Land, Carl Fogel. So any of the people who just raised their hands are people that you're going to want to connect with during the break to find out how you can get involved. I want to say one note about taking this internationally, since we are at the State Department after all. All of what we just said applies equally and in some ways even more urgently to cities like Jakarta, Nairobi, Bogota, La Paz, and so forth. These are cities that have to provide the exact same suite of services to their citizens. They need to provide emergency management. They need to pick up the trash. They need to enable public safety. They need to fix potholes. They need to do all of the same things that these cities in the United States do. And so our fervent hope is that we'll be able to get participation, contribution, and execution of these open platforms for cities and state and local governments in countries outside the U.S. as well. So finally, how can you get involved? Well, there's a website, a mailing list, a Twitter feed, and a hashtag, all of the usual ways. And I would urge everybody in the room who's interested to meet one of the people who raised their hands and find out how you can get involved and make a contribution as well. Thank you very much.
Andrew, thank you so much. So we're going to go on to our next panel. I want to invite a few people up to the stage. I know Chris is right here. We're going to talk about how we got here, industry and open source software. So we'll be joined up here by Jeremy Allison, the creator of Samba, Chris DiBona from Google, Open Source and Public Sector Programs Manager, and my buddy Darren Crape from the State Department, who's a social media specialist. Thanks.
Testing. Great. Here you go. Oh, thank you. We all have microphones now. Actually, most of you do. If you hit speak, you can just, yammer and play some music, whatever.
So you can hopefully hear all of us. I'll take a really quick couple minutes to introduce our guests here. Just real quick, my name is Darren Crape. Work for the State Department. I work for the Office of Innovative Engagement in the Bureau of International Information Programs. I think that's enough about me. So I want to introduce our two...
Not really. There's a lot of people here who have no clue whatsoever in how the State Department is structured, how you guys deal with your information technology, so you shouldn't assume we know anything.
Yeah, well, I don't know anything either, so. I'm on Twitter, though, so if you want to find out
on
more, you can
Twitter.
follow me on Twitter. That's probably the best way.
Yeah.
Oh, it's D Crepe. So if you're following on Twitter...
With a K.
Yeah, with a K.
Yeah.
So if you're following Tekkit State on Twitter, my guess is that people have probably just tweeted that out. So.
Yeah, I'm C. DeBona, and he's JRA.
Yeah. So do you want to introduce yourselves, or I have your bios here?
It's up to you.
Okay, well, how about you introduce yourself?
Hi, my name's Chris DeBona. I run open source public sector programs and a small project for .org called the Rwandan Education Commons for Google. And actually, I used to work in this building on the 4th floor as an intern 15 years ago. So, in AIM. So, any of you who remembers those days, brother, go.
I'm Jeremy Allison. I've been doing open source software since before it was open source software.
That's right.
Back when it was free software. So since about the 1980s. I'm co-creator of a software suite called Samba, which very few of you probably know, but probably runs somewhere in just about all of your organizations. And if you buy I like to joke that if you buy a network attached disk drive that's less than 5,000 or costs more than $1 million, then it's running my software, which is probably true.
Pretty cool. Free software.
Yeah, free software. Yeah, so. And I actually work for him, which is...
Yeah, well, Jeremy and I have worked together for...
Yeah, since the days of the Silicon Valley Linux users group.
1997.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So there you go.
Okay. Great. Well, I mean, the idea of this session is really to sort of set the overall landscape. You know, how do we get here? So the first question for me is, what is the difference between open source software and the quote unquote traditional software?
Okay.
Yeah. So I love this one because I have a great analogy. I'd like to
he loves this
come out with one. So the difference between open source software and proprietary software and sort of secret software, I like to explain it as the difference between science and alchemy. So proprietary software...
Explain, Jeremy.
Well, I'm just about to, Chris. So alchemy will come to you and say, we have this stuff that will turn lead into gold for you. Trust us, it works. It's really cool. And, some of the time, maybe it does. Open source software basically says, here's a procedure we think will turn lead into gold, and here's how we do it. And if you think it's wrong, please help and collaborate. And it's essentially, it's developing software in the same way that the scientific method works. You can look at all the steps that go into it. You can look at the pieces that are building the software that you use. And if it's wrong, if it has flaws, if it has security holes, anybody can see this. There is complete transparency of everything within it. Another analogy is architecture. I mean, when you want to build a bridge in the state, do you want to go to sort of someone who will publish the plans, will give all the materials and the load-bearing stresses, or do you go to bridge builders are us? Our bridges very rarely fall down, but we have a secret method of doing so. So yeah, that's basically my...
Yeah, for me, the only thing I'd add is that, other than the scary bridge analogy, so thank you for that, is the real difference for them is control, right? When somebody writes a piece of free software or open source software, and you take it and do with it what you please, it's really what you please. It's not what they allow you to do within some small restrictions on the free software licenses. So it's pretty terrific. They can't tell you can't use software in a certain way. The original creators of free software and open source software can't tell you can't use it because you're the State Department and they don't like your history. They can't tell you can't use it because you're Jewish or Christian or Muslim. I mean, they can't do it because they're also a customer of some other government. I mean, it's remarkable, especially as you become important, frankly, as the U.S. government is and as large companies become. They can't tell you can't use something because a competitor or another nation